10 years ago, you would not have seen a wellbeing book in the Australian Business Book Awards nominations to start off with, let alone this year winning the leadership category, the management category, as well as Business Book of the Year.
Yeah.
So for me, what makes me excited about these awards is that we're finally seeing an acceptance, not only an acceptance, but an acknowledgement that wellbeing is an important part of our leadership toolkit.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Lead Well, Live Well podcast. I've got a great guest today. As you know, we have authentic conversations with interesting leaders, and I have a very interesting leader today, someone who I used to work with almost a couple of decades ago, which might date me in particular a fair amount. But Fleur Heazlewood is an expert on leadership, particularly around wellness and high performance. She's the founder of Blueberry Institute and has recently won Australia Book of the Year for Leadership for your book, Leading Wellbeing. Fantastic, Fleur. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming down. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book and why is it needed? What's going on there?
Leading Wellbeing is very much around helping leaders and managers to understand that not only is now wellbeing a core part of their role in terms of looking after their teams, but there's actually a skill set around it to make it easier. We tend to call these kinds of conversations soft skills or soft conversations, but I tend to find that people steer clear of them because I tend to find them the hard skills and the hard conversations.
Yep.
And so in Australia and New Zealand in particular, we're facing a bit of a burnout epidemic. Our mental health levels, despite all the awarenesses and resources that have been poured into it, are still stubbornly at 1 in 5 people, particularly at work, not just in the community in general, living with a mental illness at any one time. And so we're in this place where we're burning out, we're exhausted, we're not doing well from a mental health perspective, but things aren't improving and things aren't changing. Part of the legislation around upgrading our workplace health and safety laws around things like psychological safety and psychosocial health is an acknowledgement that unless we do things differently at work in particular, things aren't going to improve.
Yeah.
But people's level of confidence or willingness and the training and the skills to actually be able to not only grapple this but lean in and deal with it are really substandard. It's not things that we learn in business school. It's not things that we learn as managers when we first start work. And
Absolutely.
So there's this almost like this, great gap between what people are, where people need to be and how we need to be leading.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those soft skills are often the things that give great productivity and create a great sense of engagement, and people roll out of bed on a Monday morning, want to be part of what you're doing. 1 in 5 is really high. Do you think that's improving, or is it something that's still deteriorating?
It's not improving. It isn't deteriorating either. It's almost like stubbornly stuck is probably the best way I'd describe it. However, we will deteriorate if we don't do a better job in the early stages, particularly at work, of recognising when stress becomes chronic stress for our staff, and instead of just accepting burnout as the price for performance, actually doing something about burnout and workload and the way we work up front.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we will see our mental health and our mental illness statistics continuing to rise, and we're right on the cusp. So we've got close to 2 years worth of global studies now on burnout, particularly burnout in organisations across the world.
Yeah.
And consistently we're seeing between 65% and 85% of managers and leaders reporting that they've experienced all the symptoms of burnout within a 12-month period. And unfortunately, Australia is actually trending towards the top end of that.
Yeah.
So we're much more at risk of our mental health, challenges actually becoming a significant business issue and risk.
Yeah. It's a challenge, I think, given how fast the marketplace is moving. You've got AI coming, we've got this change coming, came out of COVID. There's so much going on. You described, there was something that I read in one of your articles around burnout, and that you can prevent burnout by having boundaries, not balance. It's about boundaries, not balance. Do you want to explain the difference between those two things?
Often when people are talking about their exhaustion or burnout, they talk about the fact, oh, look, I need to get better balance in my life. And I have to say I really dislike the term work-life balance because it's all life and work should be a natural, manageable, healthy part of that. So I tend to think of life as a circle and work should be sort of like one piece of the pie within that circle.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas when we look at work-life balance, we tend to think about scales and you either have it or you don't.
Yep.
And it tends to take, I think, our sense of agency and choice away when we look at it as an either or. And so when it comes to burnout, what we know about it and the way that it's actually classified by the World Health Organization is it's actually classified as workplace pressure and stress that hasn't been managed well.
Right.
And so when we talk about the need to define and understand what a healthy workload looks like and what healthy ways of working look like, a lot of that is around making some clear decisions around prioritisation, how to get things done, what needs to get done, and then actually wrapping some boundaries around it.
Congratulations too on getting your award. I think that's amazing. So you've written 2 books. One won the Health and Wellness Award, and now you've won the Leadership Award as well. So are you expecting any other books you do to win global awards or Australian awards? You're obviously an accomplished author.
So for me, writing and I guess publishing books is very much around being driven by the need to help more people to understand how we can do work well.
Yeah.
I guess how we can also be well and how we can be better at doing that.
Yeah.
And so the first book was very much around personal wellbeing because I have a view that we need to put our own oxygen mask on first and we actually
100%.
need to understand what it is that we need to do to make sure that we're healthy and well and we can show up in a great way.
Yeah.
And a lot of the leaders that I'm speaking with when I'm talking to them about better wellbeing, it's very much around my team's under stress. I've got this person that I'm worried about burnout. We've got a lot on our plate. The wheels are starting to fall off. How can I help my team? And what I'm seeing with that individual themselves, and I tend to find that managers and leaders tend to be more susceptible to burnout even than their teams because they're directing the work, they're worrying about everyone else, they're getting their own stuff done and they're trying to manage what everybody else is delivering at the same time. And so any kind of wellbeing conversation that I have with organisations is actually starting with the leader and starting with managers and having them work through and start to put in place some of the healthy building blocks for themselves. And so my first book, Resilience Recipes, was very much around there is no one size fits all for wellbeing, and there actually isn't. There's no universally agreed definition of wellbeing across science, the academics, the published literature and so forth. And it also makes sense because wellbeing is something that's experienced uniquely. But people are expecting a one-size-fits-all kind of magic bullet. Okay, how do I solve for my well-being? Let's go, move on. And it doesn't quite work like that. So my first book is very much around you need to make sure that you've got the building blocks for yourself in place for good well-being. And it's not just physical health and fitness. It also includes mental fitness and it also includes emotional well-being. And here are some smart ways of looking at it to put in the foundations for yourself. Yeah. So Leading Wellbeing was deliberately the second book because it's very much for me, once you've got your own backyard in order, you're not only going to have greater capacity to support people in your team, but you'll also have the capability to be able to flex and stretch with them.
Love it. And I think that's very true. People who are sort of naturally altruistic and want to look after their team often don't look after themselves. They say it's selfish But I totally agree. Like looking after number one is not selfish at all. It's absolutely essential. And if you get that right, then you're available to sort of serve those around you and help create an environment. So the essence of this book, Leading Wellbeing, you talked a bit in there about how a leader can see and detect and check what the signs are for some deterioration in mental wellbeing, and then you've put some ways that you can connect. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of those things?
The first question I often get from leaders is very much around how do I actually know if someone is struggling with their mental health?
Yeah.
And when during that struggle, do I need to be doing something? And then it generally follows on from, so if I have to check in with them, what's actually my responsibility
Yeah.
with this? And what happens if I get it wrong? What happens if I say the wrong thing? And if I get it wrong, am I somehow going to put myself at risk or the organisation at risk? And so there's a lot of fear around, I guess, leaning into noticing when someone's not okay. And there's almost this, if I pretend that it's not there, then I don't need to do something about it, and then I don't open myself up to risk. And the reason for writing the book is to actually show people that it's actually a lot easier and a lot more straightforward to recognise the signs and have an appropriate conversation without needing to be some kind of mental health professional or medical expert.
Yeah.
And then from a business perspective, the longer that we leave someone struggling, the worse their mental health is likely to be. But also from a leader's perspective, the worse their performance is going to be for longer, which will generally have a spiralling effect and usually a negative effect on the rest of the team, because when someone's not pulling their weight or is dropping the ball or is unable to keep up with the rest of the team, it leads the rest of the team down. Absolutely. There's a level of resentment from the rest of the team, from the leader as well, tolerating this kind of performance. But there's also a lack of safety from the team. They're looking at a leader who is unable to take care of their team. And so there then becomes this climate where the team knows that it's actually not safe and it's not okay not to be not okay.
Yep.
And so we have this almost this like spiraling effect that gets exacerbated, where one person in a team can lead to some extent extra stress and pressure and potential mental health issues on the rest of the team as well. And so part of writing the book was to show leaders that, one, it's actually a lot easier than we expect to have these conversations. Two, they're skills and they're trainable. So many people believe you can talk to people, or you're a people person, or you're not. These skills are very trainable. All of us can learn to have better conversations. And all of us can learn that looking after our team and team wellbeing is actually a natural part of our role at work and will actually lead to performance benefits. Whereas at the moment, by letting it go, letting it roll, we're actually creating risk and unsafe environment and deteriorating performance, not just for one team member, but potentially for all of them.
Yeah.
And so I do care passionately about wellbeing at work.
Good on you.
And I think one of my key messages that I want to share with people is that wellbeing is a foundation for performance.
Absolutely.
So for so many people at work, wellbeing is a project. It's something that's given to HR. It's something that's nice to have. We might start with, yoga at a lunchtime, and we wonder why no one turns up because we're too busy and our workload's not being managed and we're not doing okay. Whereas wellbeing is actually the way that we do our work. It's the way that we support people, and it's the way that we enable performance.
Love it. So is that message landing, do you think?
It is starting to.
Yep.
And I guess that's what I'm so excited about with my book award win. 10 years ago, you would not have seen a wellbeing book in the Australian Business Book Awards nominations to start off with, let alone this year winning the leadership category, the management category, as well as Business Book of the Year.
Yeah.
So for me, what makes me excited about these awards is that we're finally seeing an acceptance, not only an acceptance, but an acknowledgement that wellbeing is an important part of our leadership toolkit and our overall business performance skill set.
I love it. I'm glad there's so much more around that conversation and the importance of culture and creating an environment where people do well, looking after people. I mean, even if you don't have any altruistic tendencies at all, you get a better commercial outcome. And I think people are starting to realise that, particularly in a fast-moving environment where one person doing the thinking, everyone else just doing the doing, is not it just doesn't work. But if you create a great culture, people are engaged, productivity increases, and you get a much better outcome. So it's good to hear. So I'm glad you were recognised on that. That's excellent. I'm really pleased to see that. And I think you've done a great job too in breaking down, what's the need, how do you approach it, how do you recognise it, and then what can you do to, and you've sort of codified that whole process for a leader, which is awesome. Can I just come back to your own leadership journey? Because I know you've had 20 years experience in leadership in your own right before you've gone out and done consulting and advisory work. Do you want to just walk us through your leadership experience? I know we work together, but what was your leadership experience?
My leadership journey, I guess, was a very, very interesting one. Not that I'm wanting to particularly age myself here, but thank you so much for that question, Mark, as well. When I first started work and was figuring out what my manager and leadership career could looked like or could look like, or how to make that happen, we actually didn't have things like equal opportunity laws. We didn't have psychological safety. We didn't have anything around behavioural expectations, around bullying and how you treated people. And so I pretty much experienced and faced every single kind of bad behaviour that you possibly could along my particular career trajectory. And so when it came to making the transition, particularly from my leadership career into consulting, because I'd experienced so much around what great work was and looked like and what great leadership was and looked like, but also the exact opposite, what bullying, oppressive, cutting people down leadership looked like and toxic cultures felt like. I had an extremely clear vision and understanding around what healthy leadership is and what a healthy work environment is, and also the positive effects on performance when you get it right versus the negative effects. And in some cases, I've seen quite dramatic business declines following some of those toxic leaders and toxic cultures. And so with my leadership career, I guess what has always been almost my version of true north is a very strong sense of values and a very strong sense of burning people out for performance and results is not acceptable. Yeah. And so even when I saw that all around me, I was always thinking, we can do this better. How do we do this better, and what does that look like? And so my original objective was I wanted to get to CEO by the age of 40. I actually never ever wanted to be a consultant. I always saw myself as a corporate careerist or a long-time corporate careerist. And so I achieved that CEO role at 37. And when I got there and I saw all the various behaviours and expectations, the politics between boards and roles and people, I also navigated all of the bad behaviours that come out of extreme crisis and stress with the global financial crisis, which wasn't a nice, a particularly nice time to be a leader or in business at that particular point in time. And not only did I financially steer that business through, but I did it with integrity and open honesty and communication and keeping a full complement of staff despite directives that said I needed to reduce costs by 30%. Yeah. And I proved to myself, but I also proved with results that when you do the right thing by people, you will also get the business results, and you will get not just the sales outcomes, but also the profit outcomes. Yep. So that transition from leadership to consulting was quite interesting because I'd got to the point in my career where I actually don't have anything left to prove. Yep. I actually have achieved everything that I need to achieve, and where my leadership journey is now going is around showing other organisations that there are better ways of working, there are better ways of treating people, and you can get better results and performance from that.
Singing my song, Fleur, singing my song. You're a great leader, by the way. It was just a pleasure working with you. It was fantastic. Just left you alone and tried to run interference when people were annoying you. That was pretty much my entire role at the time. But no, you did a great job, like just a massive, not only the commercial outcomes, but people respected you. You engaged, you created a great environment under difficult circumstances. There were lots of challenges during those times. So it's fantastic that you're now out helping other people work their way through understanding those things. It's such a simple concept and so profound, and yet I find so many business leaders just don't operate in that space. And so we end up with legislation, which is some of it's just be reasonable and treat people well and have some common sense. Pretty much covers all the latest lots of legislation. What do you think about some of the latest legislation that's come down around psychosafety and there's environmental stuff coming as well, and plus the we're not allowed to contact people outside of work hours, sort of right to disengage. What's your thoughts about that?
When we tend to find quite black and white and strong legislation emerging in a country or a market, it is often because we are seeing that people aren't being treated well, and we are seeing substantial issues starting to emerge.
Yeah.
My view is that we shouldn't need legislation like this.
Absolutely.
If we fundamentally treat people as human beings and we value who they are as well as what they're doing and what they are delivering, we wouldn't need to have things like right to disconnect and psychosafety rules and laws around, it's not okay to bully and so forth. So I guess as a starting place, I think it's quite sad that we need legislation like that. But moving on from that,
sure. One
of the things that I think many people are not yet realising or understanding about the legislation, particularly taking it from a compliance perspective or a compliance lens, and we've got a lot to do when it comes to compliance. A lot of organisations don't yet have, I guess, strategies, let alone policies around how do we support people when they're unwell? How do we support people when they work differently? How do we enable different people to bring their best in unique ways? Because each of us is different. They're going to be slightly different conditions that are going to help people to thrive. Yeah. Once we get through, I guess, this hump of making sure we've got the basics around treating people well and ensuring they not only come to work safe, but they leave work healthy and safe for their families as well, I'm hoping that organisations will actually start to understand that when we treat people well, we perform better. Yeah. And particularly when it comes to the training that I'm doing around psychological safety and psychosocial health skills for leaders, in the initial phases, I get a lot of resistance around, I've already got so many things on my plate now, we're expected to do this. Where am I going to find the time to have, check in with my staff? When am I going to find the time, or why should I be looking after or looking out for my, staff's workload and stress when they should be able to manage their jobs? Where am I going to find the time for this? I already spend 80% of my working week in meetings. So there's a lot of resistance because people are looking at these laws as something over and above, or this is something over and above what I need to do, or this is being added to a to-do list that's already too long that I'm not coping with. Yeah. Whereas what we need to understand, or I'm hoping that people will begin to understand, and this is what I do in my training, is the things that the legislation are asking us to do in terms of looking after people better actually just changes to the way we do things. Yes. It's not extra things to our to-do list. So it's just relearning some things and ways of speaking, better utilising our conversations, better utilising our meetings. And that if we actually get things like psychological safety right, we increase things like engagement, productivity, innovation, collaboration, our abilities to form and hold better relationships at work, anywhere between 9 and 30%.
Yeah, there you go.
So So well-being at work is not just good for people, it's actually a competitive advantage, and it's great for business if we actually embrace it in the way that can really enable people.
For sure. And more so, I think, too. Like, I think there's I'd love to hear your comments on this, actually. The generational change. Do you think there's a change in leadership style? I'm a baby boomer. You're not a baby boomer, just for the record. But there's definitely, I think we've moved away from that industrial command and control model largely, although some people are still operating very much in that space. I think there's a recognition that companies that value culture and value people, new generations of employees are much more likely to vote with their feet than perhaps other generations have been in the past.
There is absolutely a generational change in terms of expectations about leadership and leadership style and expectations around the way that work is done. But the fundamentals around what people want from work and how they want to be at work are consistent across all generations.
Right.
So everyone wants to come to work to be able to do a good job. Yeah. They want work that gives them a sense of self-worth and meaning. They want to be able to achieve things.
Yeah.
They want to feel valued and be respected. They want to get along well with their co-workers. So I run a series of structured mentoring programs for another number of government organisations. Yeah. And I have graduate trainee programs. I've got a Veterans Pathways program, so significant, it's like career and life change. I also do a senior leaders mentoring program, so for our top assistant secretaries and so forth as well. And awesome. Every single mentoring program, what people are coming in and wanting support with when it comes to work satisfaction is exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's just at a different level, which reflects the life stage of where you are developing your career.
Yeah, I love it. Just those human needs. It's good. We spend so much time at work. It can be a great place where we can contribute and advance and get mastery. And it's a wonderful opportunity if the environment is right.
Absolutely.
So Fleur, tell us a little bit more about what else. You've given us an idea of some of those programs. What else are you doing as far as if people are interested in connecting with you? What sort of services are you offering?
I work with leaders and their teams to help create both healthy as well as high performance. And one of the things that you talked about a little bit earlier is the pace of change and the level of change with, AI, fast markets. We've gone from, a few years of boom times in Australia to now many businesses, doing it tough and struggling at the moment. Those business cycles, seem to be faster, while at the same time the world of work is changing faster. Yeah. And often when people think well-being, they're thinking physical well-being and making sure that people are physically okay and have reasonable energy when it comes to work. But what I do as part of the Healthy High Performance is we look at things like our emotional agility. We talk about things like our mental adaptability. What kind of coping skills do we need under pressure? How do we recognise the early signs of stress both in selves and our others and have the internal resources to be able to course correct and manage that?
Yep.
So working very much around what healthy looks like individually as well as for teams, but also what those sustainable skills are for us to be able to manage consistent high performance over time, regardless of the lumps and bumps or the cycles that come through. Yep. So work with leaders around how to create psychologically safe teams and have the mental health conversations. I'm doing a lot of work with leaders around what the psychosocial skills are. We're seeing a lot of legislation and a lot of audits that say, do you have psychological hazards at work or not? I don't know about you, but I don't talk about psychological hazards in my everyday conversation. Very few people actually know what they are. So I demystify these things and say, hey, we need to look at workload. We need to look at the way we're communicating. Here are the various kinds of skills that we can make sure that we have in place that means we actually don't get to unmanageable levels of stress in the first place and that we're supporting our teams to continue to do well and to thrive.
Love it.
So it's a combination of mentoring and training, but specifically as a starting point around leaders' personal performance and then supporting their teams.
And you're translating some of these what seems like ethereal concepts into practical reality and audits and such like, and training. And that's amazing.
Absolutely. So it's helping people take the language and the legislation and the audits. I do not do those. Those are not my happy place. We have got plenty of compliance people who can do
Awesome.
that.
Yep.
And I turn it into ways of working, leading, communicating, and organisational culture.
Fantastic. Love it. Fleur Heazlewood, absolute pleasure. It's been so good to see you again. And thanks for what you're doing. Congratulations on the book. If you haven't read the book, get out there and see it. The links are in the verbiage down below, and make sure you take a good look. It's a very important topic and well worth looking at. Fleur, thank you so much for today. Great to see you.
Pleasure, always.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us at the Lead Well, Live Well vodcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you want to know more about what we're all about, you can find us at leadwelllivewell.com.au.